A lot of people feel like there's something wrong with the housing market. People are working more hours, they're earning more than they did a few years ago, and some people are doing everything right. And yet, it feels like people who already own homes keep building more wealth, while people who rely mostly on a paycheck keep falling behind. And that's not a coincidence. Housing doesn't reward effort the same way working a job does. It rewards ownership. And once you understand how the housing market actually works, that starts to make sense. So let me explain. When you work for money, your income is mostly linear. You trade time for dollars. You get paid, you spend some, and you save some if you're disciplined. But if you stop working, the income stops. Even raises usually come slowly, they often just keep up with inflation, and that income gets taxed immediately. Housing works completely different. When you own a home, you're not just earning money, you're holding an asset that can grow in value over time, often using leverage. That difference alone creates two very different financial paths. Think about how buying a home usually works. Most people don't pay cash. They put 5%, 10%, maybe 20% down, but they control 100% of the house. So if someone buys a $600,000 home with $60K down, they're controlling a $600,000 asset with a relatively small amount of their own money. Now imagine home prices rise just 3% in a year. That house goes from $600,000 to $618,000. That's an $18,000 increase in value on the $60K they put down. That's roughly a 30% return before inflation. That kind of return isn't coming from just working harder. It's coming from ownership plus leverage. And most workers, they don't ever get access to that kind of leverage on their paycheck. And inflation, it makes this gap even wider. Inflation hurts people who rely mostly on wages. Prices go up immediately, rent goes up, and everyday costs rise. And your wages usually lag. But homeowners experience inflation very differently. If you own a home with a fixed rate mortgage, your monthly payment stays the same in dollar terms, even as prices and wages rise around you. Over time, that mortgage payment gets easier to handle, and the real value of your debt shrinks. You're paying back yesterday's loan with tomorrow's cheaper dollars. But that's not something that workers get access to. It's something only asset owners get. And this is also why housing tends to protect people who already own it. Housing prices don't adjust instantly the way stocks do. If demand weakens, homeowners don't automatically slash prices the next day. Most people don't want to sell their home for less than they paid. And most people don't have to sell right away because they actually use their home, they live in it. So instead of prices crashing quickly, what usually happens is fewer homes sell, listings sit longer, and activity slows down. And prices often move slowly or not much at all. That stickiness matters because it shields existing owners from sudden losses in a way that workers don't get shielded from inflation or layoffs. And higher interest rates actually reinforce this effect. When rates rise, people who already have low fixed rate mortgages tend to stay put. If you locked in a 3% mortgage a few years ago, selling your home and buying another one at let's say 7% could mean a much higher payment, even if the new home you want to buy is the exact same price. So what ends up happening is people don't move. And when people aren't moving, that reduces the supply. And when fewer homes come on the market, prices don't fall as easily, even if affordability for new buyers gets worse. And that's another way the system quietly favors people who already own assets. Over time, this creates a very wide gap between asset owners and people who are working. And if you own a home, rising prices increases your equity, and that equity could be used later to move, to invest, or even to buy another property. If you don't own, rising prices don't help you. They raise the entry cost. Down payments get larger, monthly payments get harder to qualify for, and saving becomes more difficult if rent is rising at the same time. So owners benefit from the move, and workers trying to enter the market, they feel like the finish line keeps moving. There's also a psychological effect of owning a home. Saving money is something that's hard for anyone to do. A lot of people with good incomes never consistently save. Life gets in the way, spending expands, saving becomes optional. There's a study that came out recently that shows a large chunk of people earning up to $250,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck. And living paycheck to paycheck in that scenario, it doesn't mean that they're broke necessarily, but it just means that they keep expanding their lifestyle as they earn more money, so they never end up saving any of it. But when you own a mortgage, you're forced to save because every mortgage payment you do is basically some money coming back to you. But workers don't get forced into saving from their paycheck. Only asset owners do. And over decades of time, this kind of like good behavior, it starts to add up. That's why in a lot of household wealth data, homeowners tend to be dramatically wealthier than renters on median. That doesn't mean every homeowner is rich, and it doesn't mean every renter is poor. But working a job is what gives you income, and income is what lets you qualify to purchase assets. But your income alone usually will never compound the way owning an asset will. The end result is a system from people who already own housing to benefit from leverage, inflation, slow-moving prices, forced equity buildup, and supply constraints that protect value. People who rely mostly on wages face linear income growth, immediate taxation even on bonuses, rising living costs with inflation because your rent always tends to go up, and that's why it feels like housing rewards asset owners, not workers. Not because work has no value, but because ownership changes how money behaves over time. That doesn't mean that everyone should rush out and buy a home at any price. But it does mean you need to understand the difference between asset owners and workers. Because once you understand how the housing market works, it becomes clear why people who already own assets tend to pull ahead and why relying on wages alone often isn't enough to keep up.